So welcome. I mean, my name's Corey, and you know, I've been teaching in the wellness space for almost a decade now, coming from traditional fitness and martial arts and traditional nutrition topics, and then it really traversed into the realms of energy healing, of detoxification, of spiritual awakening, and coming to an alignment with the true nature and the true self. And so everything that we're speaking of today is really going to encompass the full spectrum of that approach. And no matter where you're at, I feel like you'll be able to take something from this and, specifically come into a certain clarity within yourself as to what's the kind of path of least resistance on this journey of purification. And, again, coming back to your natural way and the natural way of your being, because, in so many ways we could say that a lot of the common topics of society, maybe our food or what we're doing as our vocation, our creative expression, at times can move us away from this natural flow. And I'd say food is one of the most like conditioned or dogmatic topics of them all within the wellness space. And that's likely because we're so emotionally connected to food. And I feel like that's a core topic we can get into, because that's generally a sticking point for most people, is there's going to be, a plethora of energy around food and emotions, and what we eat and where those memories have come from. And in so many ways, food is so intertwined with the topic of love, because like from our mothers or our family in a loving gathering, or to love somebody is to feed them. And naturally, this is a predominant kind of program we have in our minds. That's not necessarily a negative thing, but it can be if it isn't coming with a sense of balance. So I have some core things I want to get into, but I think it'd be cool to start, Katie, just us exploring together. I mean, first, I forget how we met. I mean, we haven't met in person. We've been just virtually connected for a very long time.
Yeah, I think through a friend. I think probably through Sarah Love.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that's how, somehow online, and then we've had a few sessions together online.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we've talked about the detox, like if we're speaking just detox topics, we talked about a lot about that. But I mean, naturally, so many other, it intertwines into so many different levels. But just maybe let's just start with where you're at right now in your because you're doing a fast, a juice fast in particular. And yeah, I don't know, how's that going? What's up?
Yeah, it's going very well. I actually didn't plan on doing this long at all. It was something I kind of fell into. It was just, I just started fasting at the end of March. I knew I was going to do a shorter fast, maybe 7 days. That was kind of my goal. And then I just started, and then I ended up at 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep going. And somewhere along the line, like 40 days came into my mind. And so that was my new goal, 40 days. Today is actually day 40, which is awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, and so this is the first fast I actually haven't had a plan, which is quite funny. You probably know that. I mean, whole game, it's like when you have this like set, these very strict guidelines for yourself. I mean, for me anyway, often it's just too much pressure for me, and I end up breaking the fast. It doesn't end up going the way I had planned it, but this time I was much more fluid with it, and it's just easy. It's just so much easier that way for myself. Yeah, like the longest fast I'd done prior to this was in November, which was 3 weeks. And that was definitely planned, but that one I actually wanted to do way longer, and I broke it very poorly, unfortunately. Learning. But yeah, it was just, my intentions with it have definitely changed. I'm just not so strict about it. And I just find that so funny, because this is like literally the easiest fast and the longest fast that I've ever done. But it's more loving. It's more about like actual self-care and health. And my intention is definitely clarity. I feel way more clear when I'm fasting. Insights and creativity just naturally kind of seem to arise. I don't feel like I have to work as hard for anything. I just tend to feel way more connected, and not to say that I can't feel that when I'm eating. It just feels more effortless for me to be fasting. But with that being said, I know that's a personal journey. Like, I've known for years now that fasting and meditation are a big part of my path. That's just part of my my blueprint, you know. And so as I fast more, you know, I have more and more clarity about, in this lifetime, I definitely will be breatharian. It's not even a far reach to think that, because just looking at the natural progression of my path so far, and the ease I feel with fasting now, it's not that far off for me to think that I could live eventually just on liquids and without solid food. And I know that you've said this before. I personally believe that humans are naturally pranic and naturally breatharian. We've lost connection. We're just so disconnected from our source that's so unfathomable to us. We don't, to think that we could somehow live connected to our source is just so far out, because we're so conditioned to need food. You know, we only think of our nourishment really coming from food. So what I love about fasting is it really helps you tune into the subtle energy that you're not necessarily so aware of when we're so focused on, you know, eating 3 meals a day. When you give yourself that space with fasting, all of a sudden, you know, for me, I'm really enjoying like sitting by the river more so than I would, I think, if I was consuming solid food. I feel like I really enjoy the sun on my face more so than I would, because I'm so aware of the nourishment that's coming from these elements. So that's a little bit about where I'm at. It's really been an amazing journey. Like I say, it's been really easy, and I'm not just saying that. Like yesterday was probably my hardest day so far. I had cravings, and I think it was because today's day 40, and I still wasn't sure if I was going to break it. So I think I was kind of getting a little bit like, oh, tomorrow could be the day. But I'm at day 40, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going for now until it feels no longer aligned. But it's really just like a natural way for me right now. So
nice.
Yeah.
It feels nice.
It feels really nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there's so many points that you nailed there, in the sense of, I mean, obviously we're jumping right in. I mean, we're going into the idea that, like, you know, we have a woman here doing 40 days of juice fast, and she's talking about breatharianism. So for anyone who's coming in here, no, it's amazing. But anyone who's coming in naturally, you know, this may have been something you've considered at a time, but maybe you've never fasted before. And actually, that'd be a cool thing to hear in the comments. Like how long, maybe what's your longest fast that you've done, or where you're at with your food right now, or your consumption. Just giving us a picture would be nice. But you know, the key piece that you mentioned about like the kind of effortlessness, I feel that's the key, right? Like, because when I did my last fast of 40 days last year, it was the same, right? It was so effortless. It wasn't planned. It was like day 1 I'm fasting, and then day 2, and then day 7, and then day 40, you know. And the beauty of where I feel like we're going today, for everyone so they have some context, is how can we navigate this journey and this process in a way that really can be effortless, as much as you may have potentially gone really off the rail over the course of your life, eating things and consuming things in a way that can be and has been potentially very damaging to the body. Even if that's the case, you know, there is a process that can unfold here, where you're not overwhelming yourself, you know, where you don't feel like it's too far outstretched. And there was many times where, you know, like you said, like you say, I'm doing a 7-day fast, or I'm doing this, and literally just that kind of energy sometimes creates too much of a structure, or rigidity around the process, right? And you know, the important element here is that this journey as a whole is a journey of purification of mind, body, and soul, on varying and many layers of our body. You know, our body is a multidimensional body, exists in physical form and in non-physical form. And the nature of how we experience life is infinitely different for each of us, because we're all coming with very different histories and genetic lines, and you know, our human design. This is one topic obviously we've got into, and I've done readings with a couple of people, like your brother's here, Andrew's here. There's a couple of you that have done human design readings. So human design is just an archetypal system similar to astrology, but just a lot more detailed in its ability to support us in what feels most natural, what is the natural flow for our individual experience, which is a vital topic because there's a lot of generalized teachings all over the internet. We can find them everywhere, and all kinds of books we can read. But when it's applicable to us individually, this is where it really has its value. So I'm happy you spoke on the effortlessness of it all, because this is the way.
Yeah, and to say a little bit more about that, like I'm sharing my personal journey, but I recognize it's definitely not for everyone, and it shouldn't be the goal to be like, my goal before was very like, I need to be breatharian, I need to be this, and it was very actually self-punishing, to be honest. It wasn't coming from this place of love, this place of ease. And so I think it's really important to recognize that it is a process. So even just going vegetarian or vegan or raw for a lot of people is a huge step. And like, I've been doing this, I went vegan when I was in 2010, and then slowly going to raw food, and then fruitarian, adding more juicing and adding water fasting, dry fasting. I don't think it's beneficial to push into try to think of this as a quick process, because it can be, but it's definitely a process, right?
Yeah, totally. And it seems like, most of the group has kind of dived into some degree on various levels: 4 days, 5 days, 10 days, 30 days in Facebook, 2 weeks. So there's a certain kind of understanding, at least, of the overall kind of dynamic. I wanted to pull up actually a couple slides. I created some slides so we can just have a bit of structural clarity, and then Kay and I can discuss, and then everyone else can jump in depending on any questions or comments. I'm just going to share my screen here, just to give a kind of picture. So I put this first diagram of just mind, body, and spirit, mainly because the purification process is going to happen on all layers. And if we start with just the idea of this quote, which I really love, from Arnold Ehret, he's a kind of famous teacher in the detox community, who basically constantly comes back to the clear position that all disease is constipation. And disease can look at as like the word like disease, the typical idea, or just being out of ease with ourselves, right? So either way we look at it, there's a constipation of various things. So that could be toxicity in the body. That's a buildup of mucus and acid waste that is stuck in the lymphatic system, that's likely been there for many years. I don't know if we want to get too graphic in your current fast, but I know in the videos I posted of mine was 14 feet of plaque and fecal matter that comes out of a body that hasn't been eating any solid food in 40 days. So it's a testament to recognizing that there's likely a lot of stuck things in our body that we don't know about, that can take many years to help the exiting process. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Next thing is the emotional blocks. I mean, emotional blocks and rigid mental patterns are generally going to come together, in the sense that I pulled this diagram, which I thought was really cool. When we experience different emotions, it really affects our bodies in very different ways. This is a heat map, and the heat map of how we experience certain emotions in the body. And I always use the example for people. I mean, most of you, if you've been doing fasting for some time, you likely have an awareness of the depth of emotional energy and how that affects us physically. But a common idea is like, if we're about to cry and we hold it in, that lump in the throat is an energy that now is stuck there, and we can feel it. You can viscerally and physically feel it. And so this happens over the course of our life for many years, where these emotions get built up, and that buildup then is what then physically manifests the desire to suppress those feelings, because if they haven't been felt earlier, you're not necessarily going to want to feel them later, because they're usually going to build up quite a lot. And so the mirror image of that buildup comes in the form of eating, to continue to avoid or to suppress the processing of those emotional energies. So all of that is going to naturally connect to rigid belief patterns and ideas. Someone who has a very strict way of looking at life, or rigid opinions or beliefs. I mean, we can see this endlessly with, like, I don't know, conspiracies about current events that we're all facing. There's endless of beliefs and ideas about things and some people hold to things extremely strongly, thinking that it's doing them some good, but many times it's causing them, again, more disease in the body, more stuckness overall, right? So this piece is what I really wanted to get to, and we can dive into this more, because that was really what you were talking about, like the element of subtlety.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the biggest thing on my path of coming into awareness of what, breatharian or pranic living even meant on a practical level, was that nourishment comes from more ways than just food and liquids. Like we tend to think of nourishment strictly on a vitamin and a macro and a protein and that type of level, but we obviously are nourished by far more ways than just food, because we just have to look at like the death meter, for instance. Like, if we go a certain amount of days without food, if your belief structure is that you need food, then, well, you may be able to go maybe 40 days, who knows, maybe hopefully 41 for Katie's sake. So we have the food thing. Then naturally, if we don't have liquids or water for less a period of time, then maybe, we're not going to be able to exist in this body much longer. Light, or the sunlight, I mean, if you exist in a dark room for too long, you're going to go insane. This is why I have a sunlight in front of me actually right now. But light is extremely important. It brings life to all of us. And then the last element that makes up the four elements, which is the last element that you cannot see before we connect with the source of our soul, is the breath. If we hold our breath for too long, naturally, this is where we could die or pass out at least. So we're just looking at the levels of importance and priority of where we actually are nourished and what is actually most important to keep this body running, and not only keep it running, but actually have it in a really vital and energetic and creative way. So this subtlety, I feel, is the real discussion when we get into fasting and just overall with the healing process. Because if we focus too much on the food, firstly, we get into too many opinions and ideas and studies and all of the complexity that, as we travel down the path, we may find that actually ends up confusing us more than anything. And then secondly, I separated these two pieces because this is more the inner process, really, the inner connection we have to the earth, to the water in our body, to the water that we have in our showers or we drink, the sunlight, and then the breath. But then we also have human connection, human touch, which is a vital component in our process, a vital component in our healing, and our creative expression, our ability to move our life in a way where we feel like energy is moving. Because that's one thing I think that's important to touch on overall. And maybe, you can touch on this too, Katie, of why this process has been effortless to you. And I feel like in my journey, even with the idea of like detox and fasting, sometimes we come into these topics with this kind of intention of like, what am I going to get out of this? Like, I'm going to do this juice cleanse. Like, what am I going to get out of this? How is this going to benefit me? How is this going to make my life better? And obviously that sounds rational. But in some ways, we can find ourselves getting into consumptive mode, even with personal development or spiritual practice or things like this, where we're more so consuming things as a way to further identify more. And you see this all the time with vegans. Like they're running around with the vegan flag and things like this, which is fine. But
That was me.
yeah. Me. So there's a certain kind of like identification process that can come when we're not opening our creative energy in a way where we're approaching life in a sense of like, what am I really bringing to this experience? Like, what is the true intention behind how I'm approaching this relationship? That could be with a person, with the food, with your job, with your spare time. We have a lot of spare time right now. So these elements I found to be even more important and got me out of my head, at least, with this process of eating, because it can really be simple. We'll get into like how we can simplify it, but I don't know if you have anything to share on that. I feel like it's a key piece.
Yeah. Just like on the ease part.
Well, yeah, like on the full spectrum of subtlety, and maybe just the how your creative flow unfolds, like when you're in a fasted state versus not.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's been so interesting because, like I said, up until, I don't know, probably this fast, it's been like everything's been super militant, for me. Like I've just had a lot of rules and expectations, and I mean, not just in the food. It's like how we do one thing is how we do everything. You can't compartmentalize your life. If you really look deeper, it's like generally there's a theme, in how you're handling all these aspects of your life. And for me, even the way I was approaching spiritual practice was with this kind of shame, like this deep shame that if I didn't do yoga practice or if I didn't meditate, then I would feel somehow not as spiritual or less than or not good enough. So honestly, through this fast, I kind of dropped everything, like having a meditation practice, doing a yoga practice, any expectations that I'd had of myself, because I found they were wound up with this shame. So it wasn't helpful. I needed to just drop it all. And naturally, I do, like I meditate every day, but it's not coming from this place of I have to do this, and if I don't, then I'm bad, or I'm not as evolved or something. Like I just do it naturally because that's my way of being. That's just how I live. Same with dancing or stretching. Like a lot of this, through this fast, a lot of my way of kind of moving energy and connecting is through dance. And it's very spontaneous, and it's very just when I feel like it. I like I said, I don't have like this set schedule for myself. So ironically, that's really helped me in doing these things and feeling connected, is by dropping all of the expectation of myself, because I think it's really important to get clear on your why. Like, there can be two people doing the same thing, but if one's doing it from shame and one's doing it from love, like it's just so clear to me. It's not necessarily the what, right? A lot of it is the energy. All of it is the energy behind what we're doing. So for me, that's honestly, so much of this fast has been simplifying my life. And that also includes, I did spend some time off social media for a while, and I've been thinking about it again, just taking a little breather, because what I found was there's just so much noise, and I was having this deep longing to really hear my own voice and my own truth. And so sometimes we need to take these steps back just so we can hear, what is ours, what is our truth. And so yeah, just a lot of it has been about not what I think I should be doing based on what everyone else is doing, what spiritual practices they're doing, or how many days they're fasting or what they're eating. It's like, what do I want to do? And so that's felt really, really good, just to be like, who am I if I don't have, an everyday yoga practice? Because there's a lot that comes up in that space when we have to let go of these things that, because we can be even attached to that. We can be attached to anything. And just as an experiment, I just kind of wanted to go there and be like, what if I didn't do any of that and I just lived? I was just in being, and I just moved through my days doing whatever arose spontaneously. And that's just kind of what's been happening. So I think what I'm trying to say is, so much of it for me is like realizing the expectations that we have of ourselves and why we're doing the things we do, even if they look like they're there to be helping us. Sometimes they're not helping if they are coming from this energy of self-punishment and shaming. And so just linking that back and getting to the root of it feels really healthy. It's like getting to the roots of these patterns and this conditioning, because we can change it all on the surface level. We can change our life, but if we're still creating from this old foundation that's rotting, you might as well not do it. I mean, you might as well throw it all out and start to build a new house. It's like, so that for me is like where I'm currently at, of like, I don't have any expectations of myself. I'm right now, and I think so many of us are in this exploratory phase because we don't know what's happening really, so we're all just like trying to figure out who we even are and what we like without all of this structure as it's crumbling, and with that freedom, that for me, that's where this creativity is coming in. It's like, if we don't have all of these rigid structures and these expectations on ourselves, our creativity can naturally flow. And so I see how I was boxing myself in, thinking I needed to do certain things in my life. And so my natural desires and creativity wasn't able to flow because I was doing things that I thought I should be doing, not the things I actually wanted to be doing, So yeah.
Nice.
Very liberating.
It's juicy.
So
I like that. Yeah, that's a great piece there. I mean, if anyone has any reflections or comments, I know there's a bunch on Facebook, but I'll get to those in a sec. that element of just natural creative expression. I mean, we're naturally creative beings at the core, and that's something to remember and remind ourselves of. I remember a cool model that came to me from an old mentor of mine, and he had this kind of clear picture of kind of sourcing the intent of everything. And basically, it could, people use the term like love and shame or love and fear. He was using the terms consumptive or creative, in the sense that we can basically approach anything with either of those intentions, right? And that goes even like if we focus on food, we can come to, a food interaction, say, I don't know, like we're really emotional in the middle of the night and we get up and we want to go to the fridge and we come to the food, and the food naturally in this type of interaction many times comes in a very consumptive type of exchange. The consumptive energy is coming from a place of looking to find relief from the emotional pain. And naturally that comes in the form of maybe some binge eating or eating, I don't know, the chocolate or whatever. And so that interaction then also can be a creative one, in the sense that we can engage food in a way where, I don't know, maybe we grew the food or we got it from the local market that day, and then we bring it home and we spend some time, we really prepare it, we put all our love and our effort and our energy into that intention. Then we sit down and we really be mindful and we consume that food in a way that's like deeply loving and reverent and grateful for the nourishment that you're provided. And all of a sudden now you've changed the same experience of eating from a more consumptive emotional distraction to a creative, nourishing, loving experience. And so, in essence, this can be done with pretty much everything: our relationships, our work, like you're saying, like the dance and music and art expression. When we simplify and we release the expectations naturally of ourselves in a way where, like you said, we having like a structure of, okay, this is the fast, or this is what I got to do for my nutritional like diet plan or whatever, which at the same time can work. Some of you may actually work better with this type of structure, and I used it a lot, and I'm going to go into some pieces that that will help you in that regard, because structure provides a container. It's just recognizing that the container can become a prison if we're not mindful of the fact that we are the ones who determine what that container is. And in some ways we're actually seeing that in our society right now. Society acts as a container, but once it becomes a prison, then it's no longer as fun. So things need to change. And yeah, so I'm gonna just share my screen again, because I want to touch on just a couple key structural points on what is the kind of overall perception, at least. I think, for the most part, Katie and I are going to share pretty much similar ideas. Some of you may have already kind of come into some of this before in regard to the topic of raw eating or fruitarianism, juice fasting, and kind of like that whole regard. There was an interesting teaching I came on recently that was mirroring much of how, I've approached this whole journey, which is in the idea of, I'm calling it compassionate fruitarianism. And it was really just a redefining of the original fruitarianism that came from ancient teachings, that when we think of fruitarianism, we generally think we're only going to eat fruit. However, the teachings of original fruitarianism are specific to the idea that it's a compassionate approach to eating, which means fruitarianism at the core is eating the fruits of the earth, that not necessarily using the same terminology of what fruit means. The fruits of the earth meaning the gifts that we're given that we can consume that do not kill anything. So that would go to saying, well, obviously all fruits are, because we can just pull that off the tree. We're not killing the tree. Some vegetables are that, even with a lettuce, like a head of lettuce, we can pull off the leaves of a lettuce head versus killing, the whole tree and removing all that. And there's multiple other veggies that we can take without killing the plant. There's certain herbs that we can take, without killing the whole plant. Nuts and seeds we can take without killing any plants. Even some animal products like raw milk, in Indian culture, raw milk is still pretty big, and many people in India are quite healthy. And this is coming from, again, the perspective that from a compassionate way of eating, we can take the milk from a cow who's really brought up well and very compassionately loved and cared for, in a way that's not harming them and in a natural process. But it's quite rare in our day for that to occur. but the whole perspective here is that original fruitarianism comes and covers that base, which is more reflective of traditional raw veganism for the most part, even though raw veganism still has a lot of that energy. But one of the core elements around the full kind of picture there is just pointing to the fact that when we are compassionately not killing anything, we're going to put things into our body that we want to bring that compassion and love to as well. So the cooking of things at times will generally like decrease. If the fasting, a lot of the fasting laws will come into, as we get more subtle, there'll be less desire to cook food, because again, the more that the cooking occurs, there can be some killing. Now, this is kind of a controversial thing because both Katie and I have gone into Master Fast, which is a very popular fasting system that uses cooked grape juice, which is kind of the cheat code of the. It's like the Drano of the the fasting world. To clear out your like drain of deep gunk. It's a very powerful tool. So I'm gonna just share this this piece here that may give a picture to some people who haven't considered the stages of fasting before. So again, these laws of compassion and fruitarianism means killing nothing. All fruits are good. Veggies without killing the plant. Nuts and seeds, and raw and hydrated. All of with the focus of keeping the energetic signature intact in a very effortless and natural way. Like if we think of just a natural, effortless flow in our day, where we're creatively expressing ourselves, we're in nature, we're dancing, we're moving, we're hanging out with friends, picking the apple off the tree is kind of like the natural metaphor and the most symbolic metaphor of what it means to live in the flow with nature, where we're not needing to stop and, kill the animal and cut it up and cook it and then eat it. And, it's like, in a certain sense, when we really come to a clarity of what the natural flow of our life can be, there's a clarity also with where we slow ourselves down in certain unnecessary ways. And that has happened over a course of evolution and, how we have evolved, but in many ways we're kind of moving back. So this diagram here is a popular one that some may have seen before. And I like this one because it gives a nice linear picture, but I'll reiterate, and I think Katie kind of mentioned it too, this process is certainly not linear, where like, you may go through periods where you feel like you're evolving. I know mine was like that. I was terrible diet. I went to vegetarian and then vegan and then raw and then fruit and then grape fast and then juice fast. And it was kind of it seemed linear, but there was so many periods within that where I continued to cycle back, and you move through these cycles in a very individual way that we're going to cover, here and in future calls in the group. I want to make sure that support is there, because when we go through those cycles, like, I don't know if anyone's tried to, change a habit or break an old relationship or something like that, and then you end up going back to that person or go back to that habit or go back to that thing that's not healthy for you. It can carry a lot of judgment and it can carry a lot of weight, right, on the shoulders, where you think you're going backwards. But in so many ways, taking a step back sometimes can be moving forwards, and that's important to remember.
I was gonna say something.
Go ahead.
I was gonna add to that, because that was a huge part of my journey. I ended up doing this this initiation, which was like a breatharian initiation, which included a 4-day dry fast. And I mean, not only myself, so many of the participants this happens for, but you think, okay, I'm going to be breatharian now, or at least stick to raw foods. That is not what happened. Like, I went just completely the opposite way, eating things that I like don't even think I've ever eaten, or like not in a very long time. Like, I hadn't eaten meat for 7 years, and I started having these dreams about chicken. So I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna go for it. So I did it, and it was fully not vegan anymore. Like, I just threw the vegan thing out the window after being vegan for almost 10 years. And at the time I really judged it, and it felt like the end of the world, like, what's happening to me, and I was gaining weight and like the whole thing. Looking back, I recognize, like, this is such an important part of the journey. So to speak to what you were saying of sometimes going backwards is actually process or progress, that's what it was. Because what was happening is I was actually unraveling all of the judgment around eating these foods, which was a completely necessary part of the journey. Because I realized I was choosing to be vegan, but I had all of this judgment against eating meat and eating dairy, and really strongly attached to this label of being vegan. So it was very necessary to get rid of all of the labels and just do what I naturally felt drawn to. And for a time, it was literally for a year, I was just eating whatever I wanted. Definitely not raw food, like just anything I could eat. And so much of it was actually tied into the emotion, right? What was associated with these foods. And a lot of it linked back to childhood as well, which I found fascinating. And so just to, dive deeper into this food is love thing, a lot of why we eat is, a friend I did this initiation with, she was craving this pasta, and she had this epiphany of like, oh my God, my mom used to feed me this pasta. And so I equate this with like her love. And it's like, I don't even think I actually want the pasta. I just want that feeling of love, And so, yeah, just to say, like, if you backtrack, it's not always what it seems. Like sometimes it's just a necessary part. Like I was back eating cooked food until probably the fall, like, and that was part of my journey. That was great. And I honestly don't have judgment really about it anymore. It's just not really naturally what I'm moving towards. That's why there's this ease now, because I went through that and I did it. I ate whatever I wanted to the point I was like exhausted of it. I was like, okay, food's kind of boring now. Did it all. Now I'm just like, wait, what do I actually, like, what is aligned for me in this moment? And so if there's any sort of resistance like that you're pushing, I would say just go for that, because there's something there for you to learn from, to unravel in yourself. And as long as you have this like push-pull thing with it, and you're like trying to eat this way, but you really want to be eating that way, I just don't think it can ever work in a sustainable way. Not to say not to have discipline and willpower, can be helpful, but it's just so much more complex than just willing yourself to do it. Like you say, it's all intertwined, the emotional, the mental, the physical, it's all linked together. So
yeah, well, it's a great example on the kind of why the love connection and also the trauma connection can be there too. Like certain traumas in naturally ignite certain relationships with food. Maybe you had a food that comforted you in a certain time of your life in a certain way, and that food specifically then is latched in with that emotional energy. And some of the work we've done together, or many of you in the call, like I've taught the specific emotional healing method that continues to be revealed in all the, you can go back on YouTube and watch our previous sessions the past few weeks. It's the same emotional healing method we use every time and time again, but it's vastly different every time, because the process is the ability to bring awareness to these emotions and the energies that arise, and to be very mindful with the natural actions, or the words or the relationships that are ignited through those energies and through those emotions, and how they guide the way in certain sense, right? So, before you have a craving for a certain type of food, many times you can track back or pull back into the feeling and feel into what is the actual emotion that's sourcing this craving right now, and this food that I'm really wanting. And so when we eat in this way, or we move into food in this way, this can be a part of the healing process, right? And nobody can really tell you, what that's going to be or not, no matter what kind of detox guru they are or whatever, like it's so individual, because it happens in the moment. And you could eat something that's so against, like say the fasting protocol you want to be on or whatever, but it may provide you with a deep comfort or an opportunity for healing, which gives you the ability to then detach, like having a conversation with someone that you need to have that conversation with. And then it gives you the ability to release from, the emotions or the energies that are connected to that person or to that situation as a whole. There's actually a funny example. I don't know how I stumbled on this. I think it was on YouTube, but it was a series on like extreme phobias or extreme kind of mental conditions. And this one in particular was, I forget the term it was, but it was basically this, they had a term for it, like the medical community has a term for everything. It was a term for somebody who eats only one thing, like only, like all the time. And I think it was a Kraft dinner. And so this guy had eaten only Kraft dinner for like 15 years. And funny enough, he didn't actually look that unhealthy. And I think his blood tests weren't actually like crazily terrible.
probably because he loved it.
Well, that's it, right? And but the story behind it was that he had a situation where his dad like hit him one day after in a certain moment where his dad was really angry, and he felt so like traumatized by that. the only thing that comforted him in that moment was craft dinner. And then it kind of kept snowballing because it kept happening. And then over time, he developed this relationship where he literally could not eat anything, or he thought he could not eat anything else. And he had to go through a deep kind of process of healing for it. And so it's a very extreme example, but this will happen, and likely has happened to all of us in some way, where there's a certain relationship we have, to the types of foods, and many times the textures of the food, or the sweetness or the crunchiness. This will relate to different types of emotions, that we experience. And it is nice to start to track and see what that is.
I know for me, like anger, like if there's any anger I'm feeling, like I want something like crunchy. So
I was gonna say that for sure, like chips and stuff. Yeah. So Talis is mentioning a bunch of vegetables that are veggie fruits, we can call them. Thanks, Talis. That's nice. Yeah, you guys can take that for a reference. I have a list. I have an article that I've written on the mucus-free approach. So mucus-free approach is basically, it's a common perspective in the detox community that when we eat certain foods, it creates a lot of acid and built up of mucus. And over the years of eating things with too much mucus, this mucus starts to harden. It's the same mucus that comes out of your nose or out of your ears. I don't know about you, Katie, but I know when I was doing my 40-day, I had like nothing in my nose, no earwax. I never had to clean my ears. I mean, that was for almost a couple of years, actually. Not that I didn't clear my ears, but I hardly had to, actually, because of there was hardly anything there anymore, And so that mucus buildup is the same that we find there, but that's just going to be built up within, your body, within your kidneys, your liver, intestinal tract, colon, all through your joints and things like this. For those who may have seen some of you may have seen the video I did on my 40-day, where I put pictures of what came out of me. It was good 14 feet of mucoid plaque. Mucoid plaque is like built up of fecal matter that exists in your body for like, maybe your whole life. It's like if you didn't flush your toilet for 20 years, what would be there and what would it look like? And it looks like kind of like a rubber tar, it's like a black tar that just, I don't know, it's just like it's something you find in a mechanic shop. Yeah.
This might be like a little too much information, but I like totally like fish around in what comes out of me, like with the chopsticks. I'm just so curious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fascinating to me, I think like, maybe it was day 20 or something around there. I had like a huge release come out of me, and it was like, just how hard some of it is. Like you just know, like it's been sitting there for God knows how long. Like, so it's super motivating for this to come out. Like I actually love when it happens, because I'm like, I'm just gonna, if that's still in there, like what else is there,
Totally. Yeah.
But no one would believe you until they do it. That's why, like, it's hard.
That's a key piece there. Yeah. No, I don't want to cut you off, but that's a really key piece. And I posted this today, like when we get into too many theories and too many ideas and read too many books about things without practicing and actually applying, this is where we get potentially caught up in just like, too much mental masturbation, or just, really theorizing about things, without really embodying the nature of things. And then we start judging and criticizing in many ways. And I see this all over the place in all types of aspects of, this path. But naturally, with fasting and all this, I mean, it's such a simple process. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it can be very simple. And that's just simply to practice, do the practice of starting, usually with people who are just starting, just the practice of starting with intermittent fast, where you're starting a 12 to 18 hour approach of not eating or drinking in that window, which is not much longer than what everyone does every night. We do about 8 hours in our sleep, let's say. So we're just simply extending that period where we're not putting things into the body. Because if we get really practical with all this, 70% of our body's energy goes towards digestion. So when we think of like all the things we do want to manifest and create in our life, and time for our relationships, and just having energy to feel good, to feel a certain buzzing, blissful, open peace consistently the majority of the time, this requires energy. And so if the majority of our energy is going towards digestion and pumping out all of the foods that we're putting in it, naturally this is the first step to start giving more space, to the inner processes of the organs, so that they can breathe for once, and just kind of like have a bit of time to just be, just like in our life, if we've gone our whole life doing, to meditate and to slow down, is giving yourself that space, and inevitably you cultivate energy just by being, just by resting in that sense. So the initial process of just lightening up,
Yeah.
that's all it really comes down to. I mean, that's how I started, you know, like whether it's from standard American diet to vegetarian to vegan or whatever, but we're moving in a process where how can we continue to lighten up the entirety of the consumption dynamic, you know, and that consumption dynamic is specifically on food. But as you mentioned, Katie, you know, like consumptive of social media, of entertainment, of, you know, too much talking and conversations with people, you know, all kinds of things, sex,
I was
different.
gonna say celibacy is like, I mean, I'm on that journey too, and like you can learn so much through that. Anything like that we're taking in that is super stimulating, right? If we can start just lightening that up, then personally, like that's when I've been able to really come into almost like, yeah, union with these more like subtle energies, because it makes sense, right? If we're just taking, it's so intense, it's so much stimulation, we don't really get a chance to tap into those more subtle energies that are available to us until we start kind of, you know, taking things out. And I mean, I think that directly relates to the physical, right? It's like as we clear out physically these obstructions in the body, then the energy can flow. And that's like actually a key piece I was going to say about this fast. Why I think this fast has also been so easy for me is because this whole year has been super intense for me, and I feel like there's been a lot of trauma release. So a lot of just like dense energy that I was holding in my body and my energy system, that has been released. So, you know, inevitably more energy can flow, and as that happens, fasting is going to be easier for you because you're switching your engine more from physical food to prana area.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's like a direct correlation, right? So for me, I think I was pushing it so hard. Was holding so much trauma, and I was trying to do these crazy fasts, and it was just like my body was just not ready for it. So it is a process. There's no need to force or push anything. And like you say, these little changes can make such a big deal, whether it's just going towards intermittent fasting. Doing 1 day a week of fasting, I think is amazing. I honestly think everyone should be doing that just to give your body that break. Our bodies are working so hard all the time to digest. People don't realize, you know, we're taught that the more we take in, the stronger we'll be and we'll have more energy. When you start to fast, you recognize that that is so not true. And it's like, I like to tell people, like, don't believe me, try it, you know? Just so much of it is about trying it yourself and seeing these changes. You can't deny, you know, the shifts that happen within you. So, yeah, just taking it slow. And then that I feel just, it feeds itself. It's like, then you get more motivation. You want to keep going. It's like, what's possible? You know, I really think we don't even know what's possible for the human. That's why I love this path, because sometimes it's like, yeah, like I'm on day 40 and like, how do I have so much freaking energy? You know, like I feel like I could go like run a marathon, you know, and it's like, that goes against everything that we're taught. But there's so much that we don't actually know about this existence.
Yeah, that's quite accurate. I mean, that kind of lends itself to the, you know, the pointer of the recognition, this aspect of detox or fasting or just becoming lighter is the process of becoming light, you know, on the journey of awakening as a whole. And, you know, this is where, for me, it's been so important to communicate the topics of fasting and detox and all of this from an integral place of awakening, you know, in the full spectrum, and, you know, the regenesis of our light body, and, you know, the varying dimensions of ourselves. Because again, if we compartmentalize too much, then we lose track and sight of this process, right? And everything is really perfect on the path. So if you are coming into this, let's say, with a physical ailment, and that was much of my journey initially, where, you know, I had disc herniations, I had chronic anxiety, I had all kinds of different mental health issues, acne, and all kinds of various physical things that were constantly bothering me. Over the course of the physical healing, naturally, all of those things release. But as you mentioned, the physical toxicity will only be ready truly to release when the energetic or emotional source has been uprooted. And this is something we'll be getting into the next couple of weeks. And like I said, the previous sessions we've done recently with some of the meditative processes support in that emotional release process, because that is the fundamental core on how we can navigate this journey in specifically a non-dogmatic way. That's an important element, because emotions are very chaotic and they move in very different ways, and we all hold traumas in different ways because we're all human. And so that's going to make this process very individual and very different. So if we go through certain periods of time where we're, say, fasting, like we mentioned, starting with just some intermittent, or doing one day on, one day off, let's say, um, or a couple of days of eating, or just like one day a week of a juice fast, or maybe nothing, no food or water at all. This initial movement will start to give you the taste of what it feels like to get more consistent with the process, rather than, let's say, eating, for a long period of time, foods that are just not beneficial to you, and then doing a 3-day or a 5-day and thinking you're going to be great. But many times that's pulling out so much, and now you're going to have to really look at that, because now you've just opened up a huge can of worms, like you talked about with your chronic process and things like this, right?
It can just upheave so much, right? And it's like, it can be, if you move like so quickly, right, and you don't have the tools to deal with it, it just like, it can really backfire, I feel, because it does like bring up a lot, and you can't really hide when you're fasting, and the longer you go, the digger you're deeping, or the digger you're deeping, the deeper you're digging. And so if you don't have the tools, like even if that's just a simple meditation practice, or practice like your technique, like just really sitting with that sensation and going into it, because we're so used to just grabbing the food, or it can be anything, not just food. Food is just one of the many things we use to distract ourselves, and that I feel like we are generally addicted to. If you don't have that, you need something to replace it, right? Because for me, it's like what I've learned the most this fast is, oh wow, I'm actually like trying to escape that emotion. Oh, I really don't want to feel that. And then really intentionally going into it. And like I thought I was fine with everything, like feeling everything. Apparently that's not true, because there's definitely been really uncomfortable emotions that have arisen. So much past memory as well. I find like as we purify these deeper waters of our body, I mean, you get more into that with dry fasting, but because the water holds memory, all these past memories for me have started arising, like stuff that I haven't thought about for like 10 to 15 years. And then I feel like I'm back in that situation, feeling the thing that I didn't want to feel then. Now I'm being faced with it. So it's like just being prepared for that. Like if like you say you want to heal, like you're going to heal, but you're going to have to feel everything that you've not wanted to feel in the past. And so I think it's just really important to have just certain tools to help you out in those situations, because it can get really intense. And it's like we're already at an intense time where I feel like there's so much acceleration. On the fasting journey, it's like extra accelerated. So
Totally, yeah. Everything comes to the surface. Yeah, that's a really accurate piece. And
yeah.
on that note, I do want to mention, I'd like to get into that meditative process today. We may not do much sound because I forgot it's on Zoom and the sound doesn't work that well. But I will guide a meditative journey in just a little bit, so we can explore that, whatever's coming up right now. Because I mean, we have to just, we can talk about the elephant in the room. Naturally, we're all still in quarantine, and like there's a lot of things coming up, across the board for us all in different ways. And obviously it's a full moon, tomorrow. So I can imagine there's various things present. So I do want to address that and make sure that we will do some practice here. But Talis is like lighting up the comment box. So I want to see if she wants to come on and say something. Do you want to?
She wants to talk.
Here, you're unmuted.
Hi.
Hey, Talis.
Hi. Nothing. I just, this is obviously something that I'm also passionate about, and within my own, experience with it. Yeah. So just what I wrote here. So fruit evolved as an agreement with animals. The plants are these super, super peaceful beings, and they were like, oh, the animals, they need to eat, and they're going to eat us anyways. Maybe we can, figure out an arrangement where we can get something and that we need, which is mobility, in the exchange of, offering a piece of ourselves. Which is like this, one of those like first kind of peaceful deals, I think, and in I don't know. And yeah, it's basically just, you know, they gave their fruit up as an offering to be planted, right? So, you know, like a nut, like a squirrel runs around and it digs a hole and plants it, or like a lot of fruit needs to go through a digestive system to actually be able to, you know, seed. And that's basically, I can't say it very fast, but yeah, so like when you're eating it, for the deal to actually, for the transaction to actually count, there's also the side of it, which is planting it after. And, you know, if we lived in a world where we all planted the food that we consensually ate, and, you know, awareness and like thoughtfully we're consuming, you know, we would be making more food for other people.
Nice. That's very,
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. It's synchronistic in the sense that I actually, you know, because I've been doing this for a long time and teaching people about all this, but that topic of growing my own food hasn't always been there. I mean, I'm in the depth of the city, but that's no excuse. And you know, that just happened the other day. I know I had a lemon and I saved the seed, because it makes so much sense that there has to be that like flowing exchange, especially as
Exactly.
humans, you know.
Humans are so funny. Like something, for some reason, we decided to just like not be part of the food chain. Like so many of us are disconnected from, you know, the cycles of life of like, you know, we eat, you know, and then like a lot of us, you know, we don't see birth anymore. We don't see death anymore. Like, you know, we don't see, you know, so many, you know, you ask kids nowadays, like, oh, where does the fruit come from? Oh, well, it comes from the supermarket. They don't even connect that fruit comes from a tree. Like they don't even connect that food is from these things that you can plant. You know, you can take that little seed and there's nothing stopping you from, you know, going to the garden center and buying a bunch of those little seed things. And when you're cutting open your melon, like plant 5 of them and maybe only 2 of them sprout. But maybe you take them and you go find someplace in the woods and you stick it in the ground and maybe you go and water it once or twice a month. I don't know. It's a very, very small thing, but, you know, and it would be renegade gardening. But I think that it connects us with, you know, gardening, but it connects us with the plant world, which very much nourishes us. Yeah.
Nice.
And those life cycles. Yeah, it's kind of, it's a lost thing on so many people that live in the cities now.
Yep.
Me included.
Yeah. Thanks, Talis. Good angle. I like it.
There's awesome. A couple other questions too.
Yeah, I saw the piece on the fears of the healing crisis there. So can we talk about the link? Well, I'll address Devon's question about the fear that comes up when facing healing crisis and during fast. So, you know, for those who maybe explored fasting in more of a deeper way, there's, you know, a common term that's used within the community of the idea of the healing crisis. And but whether or not you're involved in the detox community or not, the idea of the healing crisis comes up in our life in so many ways. You know, it presents itself in so many ways. That could be a midlife crisis. That could be a random relationship just leaving you all of a sudden. That could be something arising within your life that's an emergency you have to deal with. And in this case, you know, specifically on maybe some healing of an issue in the body that happens in a pretty dramatic way. So that, you know, that can happen in so many different ways. I mean, it's going to be endless, dependent on your situation. But the common fear behind the catastrophic kind of happening of you know, your body, you know, responding to fasting and responding to this healing process in a very chaotic and a very extreme way, we could say on some level is inevitable to the degree in which we've treated our body with a lack of compassion and a lack of awareness as to, you know, what our bodies really do for us, you know, as a soul being in this body, or the body being in the soul and existing as a sentient being, and how grateful we have to be for the body for it to do all these things, even while we treat it at times poorly. So in a sense, this is kind of the karmic repercussion that will inevitably be faced. And this is why the fasting process is not an easy one. If it was, everyone would be doing it. But it's a journey that will reveal these pains, you know, reveal the gunk out of the body. There will be situations where, you know, potential issues that you've had that you thought kind of went away were actually just suppressed, and then they come to the surface, you know, like you were saying with the emotions. But sometimes this happens physically. I know I had a ruptured eardrum, and in one of my recent fasts, my ear started really paining again, and then it almost like went through a peak and like a pimple almost, and then just went away, and now, you know, it's healed and complete.
Rashes, like rashes and things too, skin stuff can come up and out. It has to, right?
True. You know, that's true. And so, I mean, you know, that element and that topic is a vast one. But in regards to the fear that we have about it, this is something that we can consciously approach. And I feel like, again, when we're coming in a very drastic state, like someone who's in a very extreme case of a health issue, naturally there's going to be extreme movements that are going to be required for them to come to a place of balance. And this is where at times healing crisis can be quite extreme, because there's such a pendulum swing that's occurring. Though for most of us here, and again, I'm not a doctor or anything, so you guys have to consult with your own intuition and then whoever else you trust in that sense. But for the most of us here who are coming at a place where we're maybe not at a life-threatening stage, then we can be, in a sense, a bit more mindful on the pace in which we move in this process. Because if we're speaking from the perspective that you know, the true state of the human essence is pranic or breatharian, firstly, there's no rush to that, and secondly, each path is going to be vastly different. So if we're coming from a place, again, where we can move at a pace that is, you know, mindful and methodical, then we can move in a way where we're not having to necessarily face these gigantic healing crises, because they will come in more manageable quantities, you know. And this is where, again, if we're not getting identified with the idea of even fasting or raw or fruitarian or any identity around some dogmatic viewpoint on anything, still using these terms freely because they just provide structure, but not letting the mind get carried away. You know, this is where people get in trouble with this type of journey, where you could be eating, again, like a standard American diet, and then all of a sudden you want to do a, you know, 5-day water fast or something. I mean, I remember my first water fast was 3 days, and it was the most difficult thing of my life. Like, you know, it was so terrible. And I was so grumpy. I had so much stuff coming up. So and that was after still years of vegetarian. So I, you know, even though I would say vegetarian is not even necessarily that much healthier for a lot of people, but it's a step. And so what I'm saying is that we have to move at the pace in which feels right without stretching ourselves too far. Because again, if it's coming from a place of fear, like I gotta fast, I gotta detox, I gotta be this fruitarian now, or I'm gonna die, or, you know, whatever the mind is kind of making it out to be, then you're approaching it from this intention, which naturally then, yes, you're gonna face these healing crises and things, which are gonna be certainly not fun, you know, like, and you know, draining and all of these things. But the other perspective here too, which for some of you may have heard this, but some of it may be new, is that we have to kind of look at symptoms and arisings of things that are coming to the surface of the physical body as, in a sense, the last-ditch effort of the physical body to reveal to us what's happening inwardly, or what is the process that's occurring, right? So if you have like toxicity coming out in the form of rashes or headaches or tiredness or all this, in many ways, this is a symptom and a sign that there is detox occurring. The body is releasing. The body is purging out what it does not need, because it's very smart. It's very intelligent. And so in the traditional, you know, allopathic medicine community, or just our overall mindset of the ego, is that if something is presenting itself that's painful, we have to move to pleasure. Mm-hmm. And so if there's pain, we have to move to pleasure. So we do that by, you know, pharmaceuticals, or we do that by doing something to quickly alleviate, right? Which is, you know, again, it's helpful. We don't need to be addicted to pain either, but we have to be mindful of the process of moving through pain in a graceful way, where we're not looking to escape it. We're learning, we're seeing, like, what is this actually the revealing, you know? And then as you see that, you can do that by taking a bath that makes you feel soothed or whatever, you know, but it's doing it in a way that, again, everything I'm speaking to is just approaching all of this in a way that's manageable for you in whatever stage you're at. right, while still pushing the comfort zone envelope. You know, it's kind of being it's a step in both of those zones, I guess. Yeah, the key piece there.
I think that's on point, because it's like, so it's always going to be a little uncomfortable, like, but it's like just gauging that level of discomfort, and knowing that there's things that you can use also in those spaces, like, to help you, like you say, like the bath, like the detox bath. I find is super helpful. I usually do a cup of apple cider vinegar, a cup of baking soda, and a cup of Epsom salt or Himalayan sea salt. And I find, I mean, usually I have to lie down after, because it really pulls stuff out. But when you're doing a fast or any type of cleanse, I find that's just, and you're having like a lot of detox symptoms, I find that can really take care of a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, because the skin is like the third kidney, you want to make sure that you're sweating. So if you can do, like, if I had access to a sauna, I'd probably be saunaing like every day, if not every day, every other day. Because so much of it too is like you want to make sure the lymph is moving, right? So, and there's a couple questions about exercising. Like, my experience is like, I don't do anything really crazy when I'm fasting. Like, I don't, just nothing like super intense. Like, I'm not generally rock climbing or like running or things like this. I do things more like walking and yoga and hiking. Jumping on a trampoline can help too, like those mini trampolines. That really helps get the lymph moving. But what else? Sauna, dry skin brushing before a shower really helps to stimulate lymph circulation. Doing hot and cold showers as well. So as hot as you can and then as cold as you can, and flipping back, doing that maybe 3 times really helps move things. Colonics, enemas. I find, like, if I have like a really bad, it hasn't happened in a long time. Like, haven't really had symptoms, detox symptoms, for a while. But whenever I'm like for me, it was always headaches when I was fasting. Doing colonics or enemas always really helps, because sometimes there's just something that just needs to come out that's just like kind of sitting in your colon. So just making sure the pathways of elimination are open, I feel like that's one of the biggest things when you're fasting, because if they're blocked, like if you can't sweat, and if you're, you haven't gotten colonics or enemas before, and you don't have regular bowel movements either, that can be a problem when you start to fast and you start to detox, because that stuff needs somewhere to go. And that's going to obviously make you feel worse. But like, inevitably there's going to be some sort of discomfort, because what we've done to our body, like what we've put in, has to come out somehow, right? So like you say, it's kind of a reflection of how we've treated our body in the past and what we've consumed. So, but yeah, there's all sorts of things you can do, like these tools. I call them like detox tools, to help you out along the way. Because yeah, there's going to be good and bad days, good and bad. But
Totally, yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Some really key tools, I feel, that can be beneficial for everyone. We're going to be I already created a group, so I'll link that at the end so everyone can join that, who's going to be kind of, wanting to be more involved in the process, or already, just as a place to kind of connect. There's many groups on Facebook. I mean, I'm in a lot of them. This one, we're going to focus, on the process of not only like physical detox and fasting in this, but, the whole spectrum of emotional healing, of mind reprogramming, and coming into a place where we're coming into alignment. I mean, we touched on human design, which is a key piece. I mean, obviously we work together on that, Katie. And for me, this has been such a vital tool in the whole dynamic of how I approach food, and human design actually has a specific element that can determine how you're best suited to consume foods, and not necessarily just the types of foods that you should be eating, but like whether you should be eating in the sunlight versus in the dark, whether you should be eating with music on or alone, silently, whether you should be eating only one thing at a time, or you can eat more complex. Naturally, the detox community has very specific principles that kind of like, okay, everyone naturally should go towards, like you're saying, like compassionate fruitarianism, or, these types of things. But the way in which that's done is going to be vastly different. And again, the human design really points to that. So some of you, if you're not familiar, I'll link as well where you can get a free chart. Diving into readings and stuff too is helpful, but at least getting your free chart and starting to explore that will be helpful. But if there's any more questions, I mean, there's some comments here I want to address, and then I want to finish on just key pieces where people can take on, depending on where you're at, how to kind of approach, moving forward, and what some kind of practical steps you can take in the spring to really continue to move in that lighter kind of flow. And we talked about it, like intermittent fasting or 1 day a week of just juice, moving into getting lighter across the board with the food, maybe eating smaller quantities, eating lighter foods, eating foods more compared to what we spoke about, higher contents of fruit or fruit veggies. Nuts and seeds and raw sprouted grains can be helpful, but naturally when we're moving into the fasted process, less is more. We'll put it that way. You can still go through some form of a detox and a healing process with what we're mentioning there, especially because you're approaching it from a deeply compassionate way. And I always use this example because it's so powerful. And it was from a fellow teacher on YouTube. I think it was Abraham Hicks or something, but they were asked, about the idea of like how bad are, drugs and alcohol or certain foods. And the answer that was given was, okay, if we put on everything on a scale of 0 to 100, meaning 0 being the least, basically the best for you, and 100 being the worst for you, in comparison to your well-being and your health, drugs and alcohol are like a 14 or 15, versus like guilt and shame are in like the 90s. And so this is just a very simple kind of pointer and an ongoing example of what we've been pointing to today, which is coming into the depth of our emotional process and really feeling into these layers of ourselves is really where we're going to make the most benefit and the most shifting. Because we can eat fruit all we want, but if we're in it's like the angry vegan concept, like you have angry vegans running around, and although it could be it's coming from a certain pure intention, the anger that's built up and all the energy that's built in that body, which I'm speaking from my own experience, isn't necessarily changing your health in that much of a beneficial way. No. So we have to be, mindful of the full spectrum. And this is how we're going to be kind of approaching things moving forward, with those that want to continue to learn and these things. But there was more questions you said, yeah?
Yeah. The intermittent fasting, from my experience and understanding, most people are, not eating. I guess you could drink in the morning, but preferably dry fasting until, about noon, and then starting to eat at noon, and then stopping eating around like 7 or 8 p.m. So you only have a smaller eating window. And then, the rest of the time you're just preferably dry fasting and giving your body that break. But from people I know that have done that, it's made a big difference. Because I think your body is naturally actually in fasting mode till about 11 a.m. So from my experience, it's not really beneficial to eat breakfast. Like, I know we're like really trained to eat breakfast. Like, I used to eat like the first thing I did when I woke up is like go straight to the kitchen and eat. But it was just habit. I just did it my whole life. And then like I don't eat breakfast. I don't eat at all right now, but I don't really eat breakfast anymore because I know that my body is naturally detoxing till about 11 a.m. anyway. So I don't really think that's conducive to healing or detox. But yeah, just try it out. Like, or even just having like a juice at breakfast and not having any solid food till noon. I think it just really gives the body a nice break. And I think you'll notice like a lot more energy. I did anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at least in the cycles, like in the balanced positions of, okay, going, because, people are asking, like Kelly was asking about the workout thing, and I'll address that piece too. Because naturally, again, it's, everything, we have to come back to the very simple recognition and how we approach our life is that everything is going to be a product of our belief structure. And so, even like when I look back on my journey of even the consideration of fasting, or even the consideration of 40 days, the consideration of chronic living, or any of these things, for a long time was not in my reality. So because it was not in my reality, there was no willingness to explore it. And that was as simple as it got. If I believe that this is the way that life is, then this is the only way I'm going to conduct myself in life until life presents me something that I can either trust, or something where I'm forced to trust in something that's outside of the belief structure. And again, like I was saying, like this collective space we're all facing right now, we're being forced to look outside the box or come outside of the container, because it's just the natural product of the evolution of consciousness. So in our own journey, when we're coming and becoming honest with ourselves, we have to recognize that our belief structures are going to be the limits upon which how we can explore anything. And what's beyond that is generally going to ignite some sense of fear. So as we were mentioning, if we move in a way in which is methodical, in a way in which is gradual, in a way that's again, putting just one foot in front of the other and doing it in a natural pace, we're going to find ourselves exploring these questions. Like, for instance, okay, will I have energy for working out? Well, my simple approach would be to try out, to go and actually do a workout and do it in a mindful way. Don't necessarily, go and do the hardest workout you possibly can, but see if you can do a little bit and then do a little bit more and continue to kind of push the envelope in a sense where we can see what is the limits for our experience and how does this affect us individually. In my experience, when it comes to fasting, as Katie has mentioned, energies are going to be much higher than usual. We have to remember that we are a multidimensional being. So I'm just going to share this because I wanted to this picture, because I think it always kind of hits home sometimes for people.
I think I know which one you're going to share.
Yeah, there's yeah, let's see. Okay, I'm not going to assume. We'll see. So there's this one. Okay, so this is a multidimensional diagram of the 15 dimensions in which we exist on. So we have 15 chakras and we have 15 different auric bodies that connect to varying dimensions of our experience. And this is a diagram which basically outlines the process of our awakening will come to moving through these layers and becoming aware of our multidimensional self. And I was sharing a different diagram in the previous sessions we were doing that outlined this in more detail as well. And this is just simply to remind us of our universal potential, how we are very complex beings, and our energy sources from a very deep place. So when we get out of the way, when we remove the obstruction from these flows of energy, this is where we start to access these layers of subtlety in a way where our relationship with the physical dimension naturally is going to change, right? So it's not that we don't want to like work out, let's say, but it's that our intentions behind the working out process may shift, and at least how we energetically interact with the movement of our bodies and the weightlifting or whatever, again, may just naturally shift. So what I'm pointing to is that if you're traditionally used to a very physical workout where you're grinding and there's this like real intense process to it that's extremely physical, well, when you're coming into a fasted state where you're starting to tune into these layers where you feel, your dreams are clearer, maybe that's a product of, fasting, you're sleeping maybe less. Maybe you're having more epiphanies, more insights. You're tuning into your emotional body. You're connected clearer in your subconscious. Your memory may get clearer. You're tuning into more subtle dimensions of your experience, and thus, because of this, the desire to move into the real extreme physical aspects of your life may change for a little bit. That may shift. And so, although in my case, I'll say, yeah, my energies would definitely go up. I would obviously also say that the way I would approach, say, a workout, or how I would approach a physical movement session would also be different. For instance, maybe I would do a 10 to 15 minute burst throughout the day as a natural product of my day. Like I'm at the beach and then I'm at home with some friends and we're just playing around, or I just feel like I want to like move some energy, at the middle, like late at night. You're moving in a way that again is more fluid, versus like I have a 2-hour workout today and I got to go lift my my chest and my arms and things like this. And of course that may still be the case, let's say, if you're still like eating a decent amount and even vegan, or even at a fruitarian like level, that may still be practical. But naturally, if you're moving into something like maybe anything when it comes to like liquid fasting, and even initial layers of just pure fruit fasting, your energies are going to shift, and yeah, it's likely that you may not be able to do the same types of workouts. I'm not saying you can't, because you some of you may be able to, but it's just going to shift, and your relationship with these things are going to shift. So that's something just that has to be explored, on an individual level. But yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay. I'm just looking at the Facebook comments. Not really sure about some of them. Talking about seed topic from Talis saying a lot of hybrid plants. That's true. So the seeds aren't having the same potency, but I think it's more the intention that matters, to be honest. Of course, we live in a world that's not perfect, and naturally, even being, what's important to remember is that having a perfectly clean body in a world that's fairly toxic, it's something to be cautious of too, because it's like we have to be wary of the fact that we're constantly having toxicity come in us all the time. We're not living in a perfect world, so we have to adapt ourselves to that. And that's where if we get away from idealism and perfectionism, it's important. But it's true, there are a lot of just hybrid plants, so the seeds are going to be hybrid seeds. But Jas was saying that if we put saliva on the seed and we plant it with our saliva, it encodes the DNA into the plant, and then that plant produces what we lack in the body. That's a very interesting perspective. I like that. I can vibe with that for sure. And then someone asked, can you fast with a physical job? Well, I hope my point just kind of covered that for the most part. But yeah, like, to be honest, one thing that is common with certain people in various communities, when it comes to fasting, saying that, well, fasting is going to cause a lack of grounding at times. And I'm sure from everyone here who's fasted maybe has experienced that. I know I have. You get into a more, say, ethereal state, or you're connected to more subtle spaces, so you may be more disconnected from the physical realm. But when I mean connecting to subtle layers, I don't mean ungrounded, because in my last fast of 40 days, I was more grounded than ever. And it's because if we do this at the right pace, this is what I'm going to continue to reiterate. If we do this at the right pace and in the right flow, and recognizing that changing the physical doesn't change necessarily the emotional, it can support, but the emotional and the energetic dimensions have to be looked at simultaneously. And when they are, then we move at a methodical pace within this process, so that, because when we talk about the energetic body, say the chakras, if we're moving through a fasting period where the energetic body isn't being looked at, say there aren't other practices involved, then it is very common that we can get very ungrounded, in a time where we're not eating, and that's inevitable. It's all going to happen. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just that if it happens for too long, well, I mean, the universe will show it to you, like you'll be slapped in some way, right? So yeah, so I mean, this is why, again, it just comes back to practicing and moving in a mindful way. So if there's any other questions or comments at the moment.
I think there was one here about my understanding is like suppressing a rash or an itch, like in the healing process. I would say you're best not to, just to let anything that wants to come up and out. That's what it's trying to do. But obviously there's exceptions to that, like using natural things, if you're very uncomfortable, using preferably natural creams or whatever, just to help soothe whatever discomfort you're feeling. But yeah, I would try to stay away from any like prescriptions and things like this, because you're just putting more toxicity into your body, and the whole point is to cleanse that out, right? So yeah, every situation's kind of different though.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, just reversing the idea of when we're seeing sickness or symptoms, it's the revealing of the healing. I mean, the body is healing when you're sick. So we have to do things obviously in a mindful way. And again, we're not doctors, as a legal disclaimer, but I mean, there's a certain common sense that comes with all of this. And I hope this is kind of communicated under the surface of everything we're pointed to, is that we're not advocating for any of you to go jump and do a 40-day fast, let's say. But if that naturally happens, then it's certainly welcomed. Everything is welcomed in this process. But you're the inner guide. I mean, we're just sharing our experience and giving you like a structure to communicate what can possibly work for you. And at least I'm speaking through like from everything I've experienced, and Katie as well, obviously is my own experience, and also my own experience has come from teachers and mentors. I can name many, Alexandra Kunzens, Arnold Ehret, Dr. Morse, Elatan Elamim, Jesus Christ, many different, teachers across my own path. that I've humbled myself to and listened to their principles and teachings that generally were very similar across the board. And then through that, come to my own knowing and you know, present it in that specific way. And it's kind of our duty of each of us to integrate what we're hearing from those around us and our mentors and teachers, and then share it in our own unique way, whatever that looks like, whether that's just to one friend or to more people like this or whatever, you know, that is. But that's only going to happen when we have the direct experience. And that's, I guess that's like, you know, what it all comes back to.
There's so many, like, there's so many different ways to go about it, and it's not a one size fits all. Like, even speaking a little bit more on the master fast, because that's really what I'm doing right now, the master fast, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, I know Devin has some experience with this during the master fast hybrid, which you know, you're following the protocol, but at night you're having a fruit meal, and if you're still hungry, then you'll have a simple salad without any dressing, no salt, nothing stimulating, because anytime you're taking in vegetables, that's going to slow down the detox process. If you're sticking to fruit, that's going to be, in terms of solid food, the most detoxing. But, you know, that's a really great way. Like, Devin did it for 5 days and had like amazing results in just 5 days with doing the meal. So, you know, that might work better, but it's still like a huge step. Like, you don't necessarily have to jump right into just all juice or a 7-day water fast or whatever. These little steps and being so gentle, like, coming from my experience with it all, coming from a place of love and gentleness and like self-compassion is really what you want to be focusing on. Because and it's very sneaky, like, you have to really check in with yourself. Why am I doing this? Because I have a lot of experience doing it from this place of like self-punishment, right? And like, because I have to, and it's not being gentle with myself, it was being very harsh. So I think that's like the key. And you can like look at your whole life. It's like, what am I doing in my life and why am I doing it? Is anything in my life coming from this self-aggressive, self-punishing place? And like, maybe take a look at that. Because I know I've had to drop a lot of things even over this last couple months of like, yeah, that wasn't coming from a really nourishing place. That was coming from a place of obligation, because I think I should, because other people are doing it and I feel not good enough if I don't do it. So I think that's the biggest message, is the energy behind it, and really tap into your heart and ask yourself, what would be the most nourishing thing for me? And if it's moving towards lighter foods and maybe even doing a three-day fast or 5-day fast or something, then do it. You know, that, like, whatever it feels like abundant, not coming from this place of lack. Because if you're fasting and you're in a place of lack, it's just never going to work. In my experience, I end up just binging out and doing what I really want to do. So you have to get your mind on board with it, right?
True that.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just the inner conflict that just never stops. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
Well, on that note, maybe let's dive into just a finishing meditation to complete this. There will be a time if you have any other things you want to talk about, like any questions or comments for everyone here. But I do want to set that intention with this meditation of us coming into a place of inquiring, you know, like what is, you know, coming to the purity of our own heart, you know, and feeling into what that feels like in the body. And then we'll just explore and see what's alive. So wherever you're at, just get comfy. And if you would like to close the eyes, we can. Wish I could use music, but I'm not going to, because it's not going to sound that great on Zoom. Just fine. Silence is the music anyway. So we can focus our attention just on the center of the chest and the heart. And again, whether the eyes are open or closed, it doesn't matter too much, but naturally when the eyes are closed, we can really, you know, pull back our sensations and move inwards. And that's what will be the initial kind of intention and space we're in here, is observing what is currently present in our body and traversing our awareness through our body just to match what is present. You know, that could be an emotion or some sensation, maybe some feelings of tension or density, or an ease and a contentment. Whatever it is, we're just simply coming to be aware of it. And in this time, in this period, simply observing the entirety of what's happening within you. This could be the movements of thought, the arising of emotional charge in the body, or any other sensations that you're experiencing, and just continuing to return back to the vantage point of who or what is observing all of this. And that may connect you to that simple sense of being in the center of the chest and the heart, that core of you in which you always really can feel. When you speak of yourself, you may touch your heart here, you may point to this point. Naturally, it's where we're pulled back to when we kind of connect with this vantage point of who or what is observing all of these moving thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And if there's any specific charge that we have in the body, maybe it's in relation to somebody or some situation, or just an overall energy that's arising within you that is kind of just bringing you into it or calling for your attention. We can match our awareness into this energy. Maybe it's a ball in the heart or in the stomach, the throat. We're not so concerned with the stories or what the mind is presenting us about any of what is arising, just continuing to return into this place of purity, this place of simple silent awareness and observance. And we'll connect with the intention of recognizing the purity of our own innocence within our heart. Like the innocence of a child, just coming to that purity within your own heart that is void of holding into any ideals or expectations, judgments of yourself, assumptions, criticism of oneself or others. If we need a focal point to help us focus with the breath, you can even breathe into that point in the center of the chest and the heart. Feeling the breath expanding to the center of the chest, expanding through every cell in the body. And as you exhale, kind of purifying the whole body. But we can also just rest in the frequency and the vibration of this purity, this simple innocence within ourselves, which may naturally bring to light the areas in which you've judged yourself or another, the ways in which you're holding to certain perfectionism or certain rigidity in your life, a certain belief that's causing suffering. This all can naturally be revealed as you just continue to come back to this simple purity within yourself. And see how that comes to bring you into resting in the middle between what you think is right or wrong, what you think you're doing correctly or not correctly, what may be judged about somebody in your life or relationship that causes a certain push or a pull, certain charge in the body. maybe even connected to the ideals of your future and the dreams you have and the visions of your life, all of this coming to a certain balance where we return to this silent purity, this very simple silence in the heart, where all of this can be dropped, all of this can be let go. And as you tune to this frequency, naturally it can move through every cell in your body. You can breathe it through the cells of your body very slowly. You can breathe it in through the nose. And have an equal inhale and exhale, but very slow and very long without straining. Feeling yourself connected to the subtle layers of yourself, the inner self or higher self, and which is always there to guide and bring answers to your questions. Simply tuning to the naturally flowing energy that moves up and down through the spine, from the base all the way above the head and back down. Any excess energy can actually flow through this channel at any point as you get out of the way and you come and return to this place of silence where you're not getting involved in the processes of the arising thoughts, feelings, sensations. They can actually come and go. And so we can ground ourselves into the body wherever we're at. Actually, you can stay in this as long as you like. You do feel complete here, and naturally we can open the eyes and return to this present space. Of course, whether the eyes are open, meditative process is in many ways the same, because it's a simple approach of just continuing to come back to the simplicity of awareness in the heart that generally is connected, in that sense of being, right in the center of the chest. That's where we feel that sense of I exist, I am, I don't know what I am, I just am. I'm just this energy, just this being. And so this is at the core of the entirety of our experience. It's at the core of all of the movements of our opinions and beliefs and ideas and experiences and relationships. It's where we can always come back to, and it's where everything comes back to anyways, which is the good news. And so naturally this meditation is one that has various layers to it, but we got into the initial pieces. We've talked about varying tools today, so I don't want to overwhelm too much, but all these tools will be covered in more detail in coming weeks. I mean, I do this one-on-one with many of you already, but for those that are new and connected, I mean, there's so many resources all around. And then I did already make the group, and I'll invite everyone once I just set up a couple things there, so you can have at least some structural protocols and stuff for people for referencing. There's a couple articles I've done, and then maybe me and Katie will speak more on how we can explore that group and support everyone in a way that, I mean, many of you are coming from experience too, so it really is a supportive community as a whole. But as a core intention, I'd like this group to have a more focused process on just the purification elements that we spoke about today, and how we can ongoingly, just be in that energy and you know, carry the tools forward. So wherever we're all at, we can apply it in our own individual way, but then see, you know, like what's a structure that we can work with in a certain sense. Katie, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I did unmute you. Yeah, and if there's any other questions or comments, I know there was one extra question. I'll come to that. How about coming out of the fast? Actually, that's a good topic, and it's probably a topic for another day as we get into more specifics. But you know, it's there's a famous quote, and I forget, I'm probably butchering it. I mean, it's just it's more of a teaching than a quote in the kind of fasting scene. But it's, you know, like it's I think it's like any fool can fast, but only a master can break a fast properly, or something like this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's you know, breaking a fast is, I mean, again, when we again continue to source our intention, this is like, I guess, the biggest takeaway of today, sourcing the intention by what we're involving ourselves in, because how we start something is how it will end. You can see this in any of the relationships you may have had, you know, relationships that may have come and gone, and you'll see, you know, the intensity in which they may have released, or in certain ways will be to the degree and the way in which that naturally was approached to begin with, or at least what was the ongoing intention that was carried forth. Because of course, you know, like there's many new beginnings within any type of relationship. And so, like, what's important to just remember here is that it all comes back to the intention. It comes back to what we're putting in is what we're going to get out. You know, what is the place in which we're coming from is naturally the result in which we're going to get. You know, like one thing we didn't talk about was these liberation remedy. I know Katie's taken them a lot, and some of you have. You know, these are alchemical remedies that have very little like physical properties. These are energetic substances that have been used in Tibetan monasteries for a very long time. This one is a newly formulated one for modern times, which isn't related to any certain dogma or religion. But, you know, the essence of it is, it's an essence. It's a subtle remedy that is working on a vibrational level. So anytime we're taking something like that, we can very easily miss it. It's like how, and in my previous times in my life, meditation didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, well, what does that do? You know, like what's the point of meditating, you know? So if we're coming at it from this type of perspective, we're not going to gain any sort of benefit. So with this type of remedy, the intention we carry with it is really what's going to reveal its power, you know, and that's because it's working on a very subtle level. So if we're coming at something with only certain types of intentions, then we're only going to get those certain types of results in return. And so what I'm getting at with the breaking of the fast is that if we're really mechanically going about the process, rather than really tuning into to the flow of our experience, and not necessarily pushing ourselves too far, but while also not staying in the comfort zone too much, we will be able to break fast easier. You know, the breaking of the fast will come in a more effortless way, because that's how we approach the fasting period. But again, if you're going from a very extreme place to another very extreme place, then the breaking of the fast can be very difficult. And that's actually why it's so important, because generally if you go on one side of the pendulum's going to go on the other. And then when you go back, you know, I've done this before where I broke a fast and then I broke it way too quickly, meaning if we're going into a fast where we're going very light, we need to come out of the fast very light and very, very subtly as well, you know, where we're very slowly going into and introducing foods or introducing things back into our diet that are, again, in a way that we're really testing. Like when you go and eat the fruit that you were really craving, that's what happened to me every time. You know, I broke the fast. I'm like, oh, I want this fruit so bad. And then it was good, but it's like, oh, now like I feel it in my stomach. And like, you know, so you see that a lot of times when it comes to food, when you really tune into it, it's a lot, the promises are a lot better than the actual, you know, what you're getting from it. But
like the first few bites is great, and then you're like, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the specifics of breaking fast can get quite complex, so I'm not going to get into that now. But we'll get into that more in the group and over time when we get into these topics more, just overall, depending on what type of fast you're doing. You know, if we look at this this chart, I'll post this chart in the group when it's ready, and that's the detox pyramid. How fast we move into that detox period is exactly the speed, in a sense, of how we should move out of it, if not slower than how we entered. But if you're going from say a plant-based diet and you're moving into say only fruit, and you think that's going to be a place where you can kind of sustain for maybe a day or two, then naturally, if it's a day or two, anything under 3 days, breaking a fast is not a gigantic deal unless you've gone from a standard American diet to all juice. I mean, it's going to be hell anyway, so you're going to want to run back to food generally. But if you're doing anything longer than 3 to 5 days, then it is important that you take 2 to 3 days to break the fast in a way that's mindful, where you're mindfully going in and you're mindfully coming out. But again, this is a complex kind of discussion I'm not going to have necessarily today. I know there's a piece here, confused about the link between fasting and healing and how fasting brings healing. I understand that you don't eat. Okay, yeah, so that is a good important piece. Well, first we just have to remember that the body is a pharmacy, and we're connected to the inner pharmacy all the time. And it's just that if we've blocked this pharmacy, or if we've blocked this inner access to the potential of our body to heal, then the idea of how is the body healing is not going to make too much sense. But we have to just look at any time we've been sick. We could say that the allopathic medicine of aspirin or these things have healed us, but in most of the cases, what these things are doing, they're suppressing the symptoms, so we don't have to feel the pain. But inevitably, the body has to do the work to heal, and the body slows its process in healing when there's too many things in the way from it doing its natural job. That's a simple way that we're kind of looking at. I mean, there's much science backing this, which again, it's kind of a lot to get into right now. But the body has its own way of regenerating itself, and we can look to nature to see this. Like an animal, when it's sick, it will fast for a longer period of time. It will go huddle up, like a cat. Like, I don't know, like if they're sick, if they're sick and they're frantic, they're gonna go and huddle up and they're gonna go hide, and that hiding is going to give them the time to heal, and then they're going to come out of that hiding when they feel that they're safe and they feel like they're healed again. And in a sense, this is what happens when we go into the periods of healing, where if we're removing all of this obstruction and all of the energy that's being put into all these things like digestion and processing all of the stuff we're putting in, the body then has an ability to regenerate itself. It's its natural process to get rid of waste, to get rid of free radical cells, to break down weak cells in the body and eliminate them, because that's how it keeps itself alive. It's we have to trust more in the body of how easy it can be to heal when we get out of the way based on the conditioned habits that we've learned, not necessarily that are natural to us, like eating 3 times a day huge meals, like eating things that are processed, are not directly from the earth. These are learned habits. These are not natural. So we've taken on many learned things in our minds and in our daily routines and all of that when we release from, we can see like for instance, what peace really feels like. Instead of it being at the end of an adrenaline like spike and it being a crash, we actually experience peace and contentment as a natural state, a natural essence to our everyday experience. That's something that has to be deconditioned to, like relearned, because if peace has only come from adrenaline crashes, like, oh, I'm relieved from this huge, spike, then we're not going to really understand what peace actually is. Like it won't make sense to us. Just like I said, meditation didn't make sense for me at the time. So when it comes to the healing process, there's a certain trusting that's required, of recognizing that when we get ourselves out of the way, just like when we get our minds out of the way and meditate, when you get the food out of the stomach, some real magical things can occur. That's for sure. So hopefully that answers that on this level. I mean, there's many resources and things we can start sending, and so many books and all kinds of stuff. So we'll start putting that in the group and see where it goes. All right. How's everyone else doing? Feels like we're good. We went quite long, about 2 hours. So thank you for all staying with us. Yep. Everyone in the Facebook. Yeah. Love you all. Love you all, everyone. Thanks for all the new people coming. I haven't met you before, so it's nice to connect with you. And Katie, thank you so much for sharing your goods.
Thank you. It was awesome.
And blessings.
I love this stuff.
Yeah, I can tell. It's a lot of great wisdom. So. So this is good. Well, I'll be sending out an email with the link for the Facebook group, and then I'll just be posting some things, like some initial things there, and then we can start kind of seeing what arises in that and go from there.
Amazing.
Keep love, friends.
Cool.
Have a great night.
See you, everybody.